Welcome to Evaluating Your Change Readiness, Secrets to Successfully Handling Anything Life Throws at You. Notice the quote on this slide. Charles Swindoll, the founder of Insight for Living, said, "I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it." Whether it's a change in your job, health, family, relationships, or life in general, change is an inevitable part of life. Some people certainly seem to handle change better than others. Most of us know at least one person who has successfully made a major change in their lives, such as quitting smoking, losing weight, or walking away from their sure thing job. Then there are the others, and maybe you count yourself among these people, who give up the minute it gets tough or frightening. Most people don't like change. For many of us, change can be difficult or uncomfortable. This is true regardless of whether the change is forced on us, planned, unplanned, or self-created. Why? Because we're giving up familiarity in exchange for the unfamiliar and the unknown. So the purpose of this webinar is to help you evaluate what I call your change readiness, because the secret to success lies in taking an honest look at your attitude towards change and how ready you really are to make those changes. So let's look at what we'll be talking about today. We'll be doing a series of short exercises that will help you evaluate your change readiness. Then we'll talk about the secrets to improve your ability to handle change so that you'll be able to successfully handle anything life throws at you. We'll wrap up with how you can put some of what we've talked about today into practice going forward. And then stick around to the end. I have goodies. So first, a little bit about me if you've not taken any of my classes or watched my webinars. My name is McDowell Graham. I am the owner of Cracks in Consciousness. The tagline is, "Where the world is more than we know." My calling and service to others is to help people see themselves and their place in the world with new eyes, in order to help them get from where they are to where they want to be. I'm an author and therapeutic storyteller. You can find my books on Amazon and most major e-book sellers. I'm also the creator of what I think is a powerful and proven three-step process called Examine, Envision, Emerge that will help you get started on the journey of personal exploration. You'll learn how to examine your current thought patterns and belief systems, envision what you want to have, be, do, or change in your life, and chart a new course in order to emerge into the light. Now let's take a little closer look at this process and see how it applies to evaluating your change readiness. So the goal of this process is to challenge existing assumptions and attitudes that no longer serve you, and explore ways to shift your perspective in order to consider new horizons. Because sometimes all it takes is a subtle shift in perspective, an ongoing of the mind, or an intentional pause and reset to begin to see new possibilities. So step one, examine. This is where we focus on what is. To know where you want to go and determine how to get there, you must begin by understanding where you are now and recognizing or reaffirming what you already know about yourself. Step number two, envision. This is the what might be component of the process. This step is to give yourself permission to envision alternatives, possibilities, and options regarding what you want to have, be, do, or change in your life. If you can't see it, you can't be it, and you won't be able to change it. Getting clear is the key to moving forward with confidence and easing the way as you step into the unknown. And then step three is emerge. The final step in this exploration is focusing on what will be, moving from thought to action, making a conscious effort to change the way you perceive and interact with the world. The goal is to empower you to make conscious, creative choices, know the next right action, and develop the momentum you'll need to bring forth what will be. So evaluating your change readiness is all about step one, examining what is. So now we're going to move on to our first exercise and let the fun begin. Notice the quote on this slide. It's at the heart of this next exercise. The first step towards change is awareness. Now, if I'm being honest, I'm not a big fan of firsts, unless I have some level of confidence before I even begin that I'll succeed. I'm not sure what the multisyllabic word is for that syndrome, but I call it not wanting to look stupid. Many people live a routine life for all kinds of reasons. We take the same road to work each day, read the same newspapers or types of books, eat at the same restaurants, follow the same schedule on weekends, watch the same channels on TV. And along the way, our firsts slowly begin to evaporate. Yes, I know firsts can be inspiring, invigorating, instructive, but they can also be disheartening, unnerving, and unsettling, and all about change. Of course, at the heart of this, for most of us, there's fear, real or imagined, of doing something for the first time. And sure, someone can ask us, what's the worst thing that could happen if you try this? You might think the answer is obvious. However, in most cases, trying something new is probably not life-threatening. But I don't think it's that simple, because each of us has our own understanding of worst things, like looking stupid. So sometimes the best first step is to examine how you feel about trying new things, what you define as worst things, and how ready you are when unexpected firsts happen in your life. So that brings us to our first exercise. Take a look at the two questions on this slide. When was the last time I did something for the first time? And when doing something for the first time, how do I feel? For the first question, many people can't think of anything. Their lives are so routine, they haven't done anything new, unnerving and unsettling new for years. Because of this, they've become fearful of trying new things. But if we can overcome the fear, we can learn to enjoy new things. It can even be stimulating, satisfying, and fun. At least that's what I tell myself when I'm faced with change. Okay, so you can pause here. Take some time to answer these two questions, or of course, come back at any time. See if you can answer these two questions for yourself. Now, once you do, ask yourself this: was answering these two questions harder or easier than you expected? Did you have any surprises? Okay, we're going to move on to the next exercise. Number 2, identifying your feelings and perceptions about change. What if you've just been presented with a change and you're feeling negative or anxious about it? It's going to happen to every one of us at some point. Some people have a perception that says change is good, even if, or especially if, it means leaving my comfort zone. Research shows that 38% of people like to leave their comfort zone. By contrast, there's the other 62% who either don't like to leave their comfort zone or do so only occasionally and only under duress. However, the overwhelming majority of the time, it's not the change itself, but rather our perception of it that makes the situation appear negative. So how can we change that perception? You begin by looking at how you currently feel about change in general and asking yourself 4 simple questions can help you get started. Remember, we must begin by knowing what is before we can move on to what will be. Question number 1, how does the thought of change make me feel? Number 2, how do I feel, act, or respond when something changes in my life? Number 3, how do I feel, act, or respond when faced with the possibility of change or even thinking about initiating a change? Number 4, how would my friends and family describe my ability to handle change? Now, I put that last question in for a reason. I've spent much of my professional life helping companies with organizational change management, how to help employees transition when their company is planning some kind of major change. I'm really good at this too. But a friend once said to me, I don't understand how you can be so good at helping organizations change when you have trouble accepting change in your own life. Ouch. I had to admit she was right. How we think we handle change might not be how others perceive our ability to handle change, and we might want or need to look at that. Okay, you can pause here. If you want to try to answer these questions at some point, I encourage you to come back and do this exercise. When you do it, was answering these questions harder or easier than you expected? Any surprises? So let's move on to exercise 3. Identifying your resistance to change. If the pandemic showed us anything, it's that unforeseen change, whether on a personal level or on a global scale, requires some kind of response, whether we like it or not. A lot of us were forced to pivot pretty quickly, and for the most part, most of us made it through to the other side mostly unscathed. Resistance to change is defined as the unwillingness to adapt to new circumstances or ways of doing things. It can happen with individuals, relationships, or within organizations. There are many reasons for resistance, but at the heart, resistance is rooted in fear, fear of the unknown, of failing, of not doing something perfectly. People are biologically wired to look for patterns and predictability, and any uncertainty, even if it's anticipated or positive, can trigger anxiety. So in this exercise, we want to identify the causes of our resistance so we can begin to remove any self-imposed obstacle. Now, to get started, while you're looking at these questions, I want you to think about a self-created change you haven't done yet, but it's really important to you. A change you're facing that was unplanned, or a change that is being forced on you. Then ask yourself these questions. 1, how much do I really want it? If you've ever tried making changes, whether big or small, planned or unplanned, you may have noticed that some go well and others are more challenging. Even for planned and self-created changes, they may end up being nothing more than a good intention that never happened. You may also have noticed that sometimes you're full of energy and resolve to make things happen. And at other times, what may seem like a great idea on paper just doesn't get going at all. We may say we believe in the change, and yet it's hard to engage or do anything meaningful to make the change happen. In the case of unplanned or imposed changes, the not wanting can be overwhelming, especially if you don't want it on any level when it's out of your control and not of your own making or choosing. It can be hard enough to take a first step, let alone be able to remove your resistance and find the resolve to keep moving forward. At the heart of resistance to change are willingness and motivation. How much we want something will drive how willing or unwilling we are to get started and how motivated we are to keep going. For any change, when we're not emotionally invested in the change, we'll consciously or unconsciously let something else get in the way. The result is, of course, that we don't move forward. So let's look a little closer about things that can get in the way. For any change, there will be things that will slow us down, distract us, or knock us off course. Even when we're feeling emotionally invested in the change, too many obstacles, if not addressed, will cause us to run out of steam, lose focus, or become emotionally or mentally exhausted. And this is increased tenfold when the change is unplanned or imposed on us. Heck's fourth law of procrastination states this: there's no time like the present for postponing what you don't want to do. Most of us have an Achilles heel of our own devising that keeps us from taking that first step towards achieving our goals. For us, then, our 1,000-mile journey must be one of discovery. And the first step on this journey is paradoxically simple. You start by exploring what it is that keeps you from getting started or slowing you down. Now, obstacles could be lifestyle. For example, if you're giving up alcohol, your resolve might be tested when meeting friends in a bar. If adopting a strict vegan diet, then restaurant food choices may be more limited. Other obstacles may be emotional. We fear the change and its uncertainty, or the consequences if it doesn't go as expected. We might be angry if we're being asked to change something we have no control over. We may be anxious that we won't be able to actually make the change, even though we really want it. Regardless of the cause, obstacles will frustrate the change process and make it harder to take action. They will use up valuable motivational energy, like leaving the parking brake on while you're trying to drive. So imagine a new exercise routine where 3 times a week you're going to get up early and exercise before work. However, once you've rolled out of bed at 5:30 in the morning, but you can't find your sweats in the dark, the dog has hidden your shoes, and the bike has a flat tire, there's a real chance you'll abandon the whole thing and go back to bed rather than find some kind of workaround for your workout. For unplanned or imposed changes, the obstacles can run the gamut from the practical to the not in a million years. Here's an example from my own life that illustrates this. In the days before teleworking was allowed, the organization I worked for as a contractor decided to make a significant change, and I mean significant. If an employee wanted to remain employed, they were going to have to literally relocate to another state, and in some cases, take an entirely different position. Otherwise, they were going to be laid off. Now, keep in mind, some of these people have been working with this organization for 20 to 30 years. Now the obstacles are not only practical. How do I move my family? How am I going to sell my house? How am I going to find somewhere new to live? But imagine the emotional turmoil. The point is that there will always be obstacles, and we won't necessarily be able to remove all of them or even mitigate their impact. But taking the time to at least identify them can help you move forward, hopefully with greater ease. And then the last question is, do I believe it's achievable or at least manageable? I think of this as the bridge too far. The phrase refers to an action or effort that is attempted, but ultimately goes beyond what is achievable or reasonable. It suggests pushing too hard or aiming for something that's beyond one's capacity or limits, resulting in failure or overreach. If we don't believe a change is achievable or even manageable, or it's not clear what we need to do next, there's a good chance nothing will actually happen. When making changes, it's important to think about how we're going to achieve it or at least manage it and make it easier on ourselves to do what has to be done. Okay, you can pause here or come back to this at some point. I hope you do answer these questions. Remember, you're going to keep in mind thinking about a self-created change you haven't done yet, even though it's really important, a change you're facing that was unplanned or a change that is being forced on you. And after you go through this, again, was answering these questions harder or easier than you expected? Any surprises? Okay, we're going to move on to our last exercise, the secrets to improving your change readiness. Notice this quote from Gilda Radner. Life is about not knowing, having to change, taking the moment, and making the best of it without knowing what's going to happen next. Regardless of the nature and scale of the change you're trying to make, there are 6 simple strategies you can use to immediately get you to a more useful place and understanding how ready you are to change, and more importantly, what you can do to increase your chance of achieving the outcomes that matter to you. Number 1, articulate the change in detail. State the what and the why. Articulating a change you want to make involves expressing your intentions clearly and with purpose. Why does that matter? Because if you can't see it, you can't be it or change it. Here's a structured approach that you can use with this particular one. Start by stating the what. Begin by clearly describing what you want to change. Be specific. For example, I want to improve my time management skills. Now, state the why. Try connecting the change to values, goals, current challenges. For example, I feel like I'm constantly rushing and it's affecting both my productivity and my well-being. And then last, describe the desired outcome. Be clear about what success looks like after the change has been made. For example, I want to be able to plan my day more effectively and have time for both work and personal activities. Number 2, complete the steps under what we talked about in the exercise, identifying my resistance to change. If you're not achieving your goals, not getting there quickly enough, or at least responding to the change, then you really need to examine the reasons why and be honest about what's stopping you doing what has to be done. For the specific change you're facing, go back to these questions in this webinar and complete these steps. It will help you feel like you're more in control. Number 3, break the change into manageable parts that can be done relatively easily, or at least can be done. Once you've articulated the change and identify what has to be done, now you need to figure out how to make the doing achievable. This can give you a real sense of progress and achievement as you tick things off the list and move towards your goal. And action, no matter how small, is a great antidote to fear. So here are some tips and tricks for this step. Identify the low-hanging fruit. Find a task that can be completed easily or quickly, because success builds on success. Next, pick what is immediately in front of you. Take the first step that gets you closer to actualization. Eat the elephant one bite at a time. Clean out a corner of the basement rather than the entire basement. Get a membership at the local gym and sign up for one class, not all of the classes. Think outside the box. Is there another way to complete the tasks that meet your needs? There's power in knowing that you have options, even if the change is unplanned or imposed. There can be any number of things you can do to do what's in your best interest. Number 4, find your carrot on a stick. The phrase carrot on a stick has an interesting blend of literal and figurative meanings. Literally speaking, it refers to a technique where a carrot is dangled in front of a donkey, just out of reach, to motivate it to move forward. Figuratively, it means dangling a reward just out of reach to encourage effort or progress. It also denotes a tantalizing incentive that keeps someone striving towards a goal. So in terms of change, ask yourself what spurs you to take action, to get started, keep going, or finish. What will keep you putting one foot in front of the other on your 1,000-mile journey? What can you draw upon to keep going when you come across one of your obstacles? For example, think about how you will feel if you finish a task that's been on your mind. Sign up for an exercise class and actually take the class. This could make you feel pretty good about yourself when you finished it. For unplanned or imposed changes, think about the physical, emotional, or spiritual accomplishment that could come with tackling the task, which is not to say that there is some kind of Pollyanna silver lining in any change. Some unplanned or imposed changes can be devastating. A challenging physical diagnosis, bankruptcy, loss of a loved one. It's the fear of the unknown that paralyzes. You can acknowledge the possibilities, figure out what you might need to do to keep moving forward, and then discover that you, in fact, can keep moving forward. In the book titled Aftershock, What to Do When the Doctor Gives You or Someone You Love a Devastating Diagnosis by Jessie Grumman, she asked an oncologist how he handled information and decision-making with patients who were faced with life-threatening cancer diagnoses. He said this, "The thing that really amazes me is how consistently people are able to move on and do okay." Number 5, plan ahead. Whether the change is one you planned or was imposed on you by something outside your control, you can and should make a plan. By planning ahead, I mean actually scheduling time in your calendar to do the things you have to do to respond to the change. If you don't actively make time for the actions you need to do, they will very likely end up as one of those things you never get around to. Now think about that exercise analogy again. planning to do it on specific days of the week, preparing everything you need ahead of time, or finding someone to exercise with can help greatly in reducing the chance that it won't happen. Even unplanned changes can require you to plan ahead. Once you articulate what the change entails and what has to be done, you can schedule the manageable parts. It's critical that you make time for each action and stick to it. When asking how something you wanted to change or even was imposed on you became 6 months late, the answer is always one day at a time. In other words, each day matters. And then number 6, be willing to assess as you go. It's important to regularly reflect honestly about how you're managing the change, what's working, and what could be improved. It's easy to fall into the trap of assuming that things will stay as they are. If the pandemic showed us anything, it's that things can change very quickly. And so we need to ensure that the change we're making is still relevant as it was when we started. Has anything happened that means we should change our approach to the change we're making? Should we abandon it altogether? Do we now have options that we might not have seen at first or were willing to consider? You need to be willing to assess as you go. This is called learn and adapt. Adaptability is a core human quality, and it's served us well for many thousands of years, but only if we allow ourselves the time to assess and reflect honestly and without undue bias, and then act decisively on what we've learned. So now it's time for you to go forth and thrive. Take a look at the quote on this slide. It's the key. It's so much easier to gain momentum and confidence if you simply take the first step. Start something. Not only is taking that first step less difficult than you may imagine, but it may change your life in wonderful ways. So we have 3 steps that you can take. First, be willing to take the first step. Evaluate your change readiness. Remember that the heart of resistance to change is willingness. How much we want something will drive how willing or unwilling we are to get started. So be willing to take the first step and evaluate your change readiness. For everything that you saw in this webinar today, apply the tips and tricks to any type of change, self-created, planned, unplanned, imposed. And number 3, don't let the what-ifs deter you. What ifs usually focus on the uncertainty of the outcome of something we want to change. You come to a fork in the road. One way is something you're familiar with. The other way is a road you've never taken. What might happen if you do take that unknown route? What are the odds that something bad might happen if you go that way? Is it worth the risk? This is all about the devil we know. And for most of us, we fear that something bad might happen, and so we take the known road. Remember how I said I'm not a big fan of firsts, unless I have some level of confidence before I even begin that I'll succeed. Fear of looking stupid can easily derail me. But what if the what-ifs never happen? Thinking back to a time when you took a risk despite the what-ifs, how many of those what-ifs actually came to pass? Ask yourself this: what if everything does work out exactly how you planned? And so we've come to the end of our time together. I hope you found some insights about your change readiness and maybe even a little courage to take that first step. Be sure to give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this webinar. If you'd like to see more, check out my 2025 webinars page on my website, www.cracksinConsciousness.com. I'm hosting both free and for-fee webinars throughout the year. And then last but not least, if you'd like to go a little deeper into this subject and need maybe a little additional one-on-one coaching, let me know. We can determine the best way ahead. You can send an email to me at cracksinConsciousness@gmail.com. And now, go forth and thrive.